Happy Friday, everyone. Thanks for joining us today on this edition of Business Daily. I'm Lee in Seoul. We have a lot of stories lined up for you today, so let's get started with a look at today's highlights. Crucial talks are taking place today for troubled Daewoo Shipbuilding as major debt holder, the National Pension Service, meets to discuss a proposed rescue plan. A latest Oxfam report reveals that Europe's largest banks stashed about a quarter of their profits away in tax havens. These stories and more coming right up. But first, Korea's import and export prices both fell in March for the second consecutive month. According to data released by the Bank of Korea on Friday, the country's import price index fell 2% on month in March, driven by a 7.4% drop in the cost of coal and petroleum products. Prices of outbound shipments fell 1.4% compared to the previous month. The central bank said the fall in prices was mainly due to the stronger Korean won, which gained almost 1% against the U.S. dollar in March, and a dip in global crude prices. Korea's exports to China jumped in March, despite concerns of increased economic retaliations from the world's second largest economy. According to Beijing's General Administration of Customs, China's imports from Korea reached roughly $14.2 billion last month, up about 7% from February. Now, this marks 5 consecutive months of growth, contrary to fears that China's retaliation will lead to a delay in customs clearance and a rise in non-tariff barriers. Experts, however, point out that it's too soon to be relieved, as this mostly reflects orders placed before unofficial sanctions were rolled out in earnest, and that export outlook for the second quarter doesn't look that rosy. Korea's National Pension Service, a major debt holder of Daewoo Shipbuilding and Marine Engineering, is expected to decide soon on whether or not to accept a latest rescue plan for the company. Its final decision will have massive implications for Korea's once mighty shipbuilder. Our Hwang Ho-jun reports.
A decision is expected soon on whether the troubled Daewoo Shipbuilding and Marine Engineering will get another lifeline. At an investors' meeting Friday, the National Pension Service, a major bondholder in Daewoo Shipbuilding, will discuss whether to accept a rescue plan proposed by Korea Development Bank and the Export-Import Bank of Korea late last month. It holds 45% of Daewoo Shipbuilding bonds maturing this month, worth an estimated 200 billion won, or over 170 million US dollars. Under the rescue package, Daewoo Shipbuilding would receive new loans worth $2.6 billion if lenders and bondholders agree to swap debt for new shares in the shipbuilder. All stakeholders must agree to the debt for equity swap, and bondholders must also give a 3-year grace period for repayment of the remaining debt. If the plan is approved, it will be the second bailout for Daewoo, currently the world's second largest shipbuilder by revenue. The shipbuilder has been suffering from severe liquidity problems after a drop in global demand for vessels and other industry-wide difficulties. Creditors say it's inevitable that Daewoo will be put under a new form of court receivership called a pre-packaged plan unless the bondholders agree to the debt for equity swap plan. If the shipbuilder is put under court receivership, observers expect the aftermath will be brutal as it could result in 50,000 jobs lost and trigger massive cancellations of ships currently under construction. Daewoo Shipbuilding's bondholders are expected to gather early next week to discuss the debt-to-equity swap and rollover plan. Hwang Ho-jun, Business Daily.
Despite yesterday's rebound, the Korean equity market failed to continue its positive trend in the last session of the week. Now, it looks like geopolitical risks are still affecting investor sentiment. For more on this week's stock market action, we're now joined by our markets contributor, Choi Jin-seok. Hi, Jin-seok.
Happy Friday.
All right, so how are things looking on the last day of trading?
A number of negative factors caused the Korean equity market to finish the week with a sluggish picture. The Kospi fell by 0.64% to close at 2134.88, while the Kosdaq followed with a 0.9% downtick to close at 618. Despite geopolitical risks related to rising tensions between North Korea and the U.S., the Korean market rebounded sharply on Thursday thanks to stock buying by institutional investors. The strong won and the Bank of Korea's decision to freeze its benchmark interest rate also helped mitigate market uncertainty. Today's session was similar to yesterday's. because foreigners continue to sell shares while institutions try to keep the Kospi index from falling. However, a selling spree by foreign investors overwhelmed the market today, and the U.S. equity market that closed with a slight downtick overnight also affected sentiment. Most blue chip stocks were sluggish as well.
Then how is the overall weekly performance? I mean, the Kosdaq market as well as small cap stocks seem to take a bigger hit from geopolitical risks.
That's right. On a weekly basis, the Kospi market fell slightly while the Kosdaq plummeted by around 2%. As we said, small cap stocks performed the worst, falling by around 1%. Foreign investors unloaded massive amounts of shares on the Kospi market on a weekly basis again. Due to geopolitical risks from both at home and abroad, foreigners were reluctant to invest in the Korean market. Some experts even say that expectations for robust Q1 corporate earnings have already been priced in the recent market rally. So there needs to be a new catalyst to attract foreigners. By sector, display, hardware, and distribution companies were good, while communications, chemical, and steel companies were sluggish.
Now, as you just mentioned, the U.S. market closed with losses overnight, and we saw major U.S. banks kicking off their Q1 earnings season. So how are the results on that?
That's right. Since the financial sector in the U.S. has been leading the way in a rally in the U.S. market as well as global equity markets, quarterly results and the market reaction to major U.S. bank earnings have great significance. The overall picture was somewhat mixed. JP Morgan and Citigroup recorded a 17% increase in profits respectively, while Wells Fargo showed almost no growth. While the results were mixed, the market reactions was very negative. Share prices of Wells Fargo sank by more than 3%, and JP Morgan and Citigroup also suffered losses. The financial sector overall plummeted by almost 1%, dragging down the entire market as well. Some experts say the momentum in the sector has already lost steam. Therefore, investors here in Korea are expected to have higher expectations for robust earnings by domestic companies.
Now, the Asian equity market as a whole showed weak performance throughout the week. So give us a recap of how things moved in the Chinese market first.
All right, the Shanghai equity market has been somewhat sluggish throughout the week. China's Securities Regulatory Commission, or the CSRC, signaled that authorities may impose further regulations on the country's financial market. The news negatively affected sentiment among investors. Data showed China's trade balance reversed its trend to a trade surplus last month, and concerns that the country might be labeled as a currency manipulator have dropped as well. Despite all these positive factors, the market failed to go higher due to the negative catalysts just mentioned. Share prices of companies related to infrastructure building continue to rise thanks to expectations for a new economic zone in Xiong'an, limiting further losses in the market.
Now, the Japanese market tends to be sensitive to external uncertainties. So how is its weekly performance?
The weekly performance of the Japanese equity market was worst among three major markets in Asia. The Nikkei index plummeted by around 1.5% on a weekly basis. Increasing geopolitical risks tend to lead a yen appreciation because the Japanese yen is a safe haven asset. The country's equity market and the value of the yen move inversely, so the market has suffered throughout the week. The yen strengthened against the US dollar, falling below 110 for the first time since Donald Trump was elected. The ongoing land sale scandal involving Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and First Lady Akie Abe has also been negatively affecting sentiment in the market as well.
All right, thank you so much for the wrap-up today.
Thank you.
Youth unemployment, stubbornly low growth are some of the things causing headaches for many voters casting their ballots in the May presidential election. And our Song Ji-sang compares the approaches and pledges of the top two candidates in regards to the economy.
Jobs and economic growth. Among the key issues the next president will have to address have everything to do with the economy and the livelihoods of the average Koreans. Will this candidate ensure that my household economy is improved? Will that nominee run the nation so that I'll have a solid job? When this country heads to the polls in less than a month from now, voters hope to have those questions answered in their minds. Although the two frontrunners of the snap election this year share the same goal of improving the economy, Moon Jae-in of the Liberal Democratic Party and An Chol-soo of the Centrist People's Party surely have contrasting ideas about how the issue should be approached. Moon vows to help create jobs in the public sector, while An argues it should be led by the private sector and backed by the public sector.
I will commit all the nation's policies and funds to revitalizing the economy and creating quality jobs.
Some claim that the government can revive the economy and create jobs on its own. But if that were true, why couldn't Japan resuscitate this economy after injecting all that money?
The two also have contrasting views on the fourth industrial revolution.
I will launch a presidential committee on the fourth industrial revolution to support the trend.
The government should only back decisions made by the private sector. As such, having a state-run presidential committee is such an outdated paradigm.
Both presidential hopefuls agree that small and mid-sized firms should be nurtured to lead growth, and that wages at SMEs, currently at 60% of those at large conglomerates, should be raised to at least 80%. But again, their solutions to get to that point different. Moon's pledge: the government will finance the salary for every third new hire for an SME, while An vows that the government will make up for the wage difference between employees of a smaller firm and those at one of the nation's conglomerates. Song Ji-sun, Business Daily.
Samsung Electronics unveiled its new flagship smartphone to the media in Seoul on Thursday, the Galaxy S8 and S8 Plus. With some much talked about new features, Samsung is hoping for a big comeback after the safety issues that killed the Note 7 last year. Our Kim Hae-sung has more.
Longer, slimmer, and lighter. Samsung is making a comeback with its new flagship Galaxy S8 and the slightly larger Galaxy S8 Plus.
Our newest product, the Galaxy S8, will change the existing smartphone paradigm. We hope to open a new chapter in smartphone history and regain the trust and love of our customers.
Galaxy S8 boasts a wider screen compared to its S7 predecessors, with the top and bottom bezels having been cut down and its home button replaced with a virtual one that appears when you unlock the phone. But its original features like an iris scanner and waterproof functions are still there. Galaxy S8's most eye-catching feature is artificial intelligence assistant Bixby, which compares favorably to Apple's Siri. Anything the user can do by touch or text, Bixby can do by voice command, allowing users to search and categorize data or even send pictures to friends. It can even translate text into 52 languages. More good news for busy users who want to maximize their productivity. The Galaxy S8's Dex dock can turn the handset into an Android-based desktop. With a portable dock, monitor, keyboard, and mouse, users can pop the Galaxy S8 to a computer monitor and work with Microsoft Documents or apps. The success of the new flagship phone is critical to Samsung as it seeks to make up for last year's Note 7 fiasco.
So far, the S8 has received great feedback, with record-high pre-orders in Korea. As long as Samsung can keep up its quality control measures, like its 8-point battery safety check, it will be able to redeem consumer trust and do well in the second quarter.
The global rollout of Samsung's Galaxy 8 series will begin April 21st, with full retail prices starting from $828 for the S8 and $877 for the S8 Plus. But to make sure the Bixby English version works seamlessly, Samsung says the virtual assistant won't be available in the US market until May. Kim Hae-sung, Business Daily.
When it comes to spending trends these days, there's a great deal of obsession about getting the best bang for the buck. Now, this has led to a new range of opportunities for businesses as well. Our Lee Joo-young has the story.
Affordability and convenience. These seem to be the key words in describing the preference of Korean consumers these days. Take 51-year-old Yoo Ji-hyun, for example, who frequently eats frozen pizza at home. She says it's great as a simple meal after work now that she doesn't need to cook for her kids who have gone off to college.
I don't want to wait for delivery just for me. The quality is very good compared to price.
They're also highly popular at convenience stores, costing just around $4.
I can come eat with my friend. It's cheap and has just the right amount.
With the nation's low growth trend expected to continue for the time being, along with an increasing number of Koreans choosing to live alone, cost effectiveness has become the determining factor when it comes to opening up people's wallets. According to big data analysis conducted by the Ministry of Culture, Sports, and Tourism, the number of times the word cost-effectiveness appeared in some 900,000 social media posts last year was 899,000, 3.5-fold higher than the same analysis conducted 2 years before that. This was more noticeable when it came to posts related to food. The drive to satisfy this kind of demand is also seen at this coffee shop that sells Americanos for about 70 cents.
I usually don't like spending on things like this, but here it's cheaper than other stores, so I come here a lot and treat my friends as well.
Americanos are less than $1, while it's $4 at other places. It tastes the same.
Market watchers say as this trend looks likely to last for at least until the end of this year, consumers are expected to benefit from a greater variety of goods offered at lower prices. Lee Ju-young, Business Daily.
Time now for a look at some important business stories with our Eunice Kim, who joins me in the studio today. Hello, Eunice.
Hello.
All right, so today we're going to look at this report that claims that some of Europe's top banks have been stashing away their profits in tax havens.
That's absolutely right. This is coming from Oxfam, which is, of course, the UK-based group focused on eliminating global poverty. It found that not only were some of Europe's biggest banks using tax havens to stash some of their cash, some appear to be using them actively to avoid paying billions of euros in taxes. Take a look.
An Oxfam report issued at the end of March analyzed country-by-country 2015 accounting data submitted by Europe's 20 largest lenders as required by the EU. And something was amiss. For one, judging by the numbers alone, employees at subsidiaries in low-tax jurisdictions were 4 times more productive than their counterparts in non-tax haven countries. Staff numbering just 7% of the overall workforce had brought in 26% of the overall revenue. Digging deeper, their combined profits in the state of Luxembourg, home to about 500,000 people, came to 4.9 billion euros, which was more than profits made in the UK, Sweden, and Germany combined.
And this suggests that some banks may be using tax havens to avoid paying their fair share of tax or to facilitate tax dodging for their clients.
The report showed Europe's 5th largest lender, Barclays, paid an effective tax rate of 0.2% in Luxembourg when it filed about €500 million of profit. This as Deutsche Bank, which filed a loss in its home country of Germany in 2015, booked an amazing near €2 billion profit at their subsidiaries in tax haven countries. While some countries attract business via low tax incentives, other destinations don't require profits to be taxed at all. The report said 0 taxes were collected on some €383 million in profit made by EU's top 20 banks. In all, they'd sent €25 billion to tax havens, which accounts for about a quarter of their profit, according to Oxfam's analysis. Some argue that tax haven governments from the Cayman Islands to Ireland are simply offering competitive savings. But Oxfam notes the loss of vital tax revenues, estimated to be in the hundreds of billions of dollars by countries in which the banks actually operate, leads to higher value-added taxes for all and shrinking budgets for public services affecting those who need it most, further worsening inequality and poverty.
Wow, those numbers are pretty shocking, yeah? I mean, this reminds me of the Panama Papers leak from last year, which exposed how prevalent the use of offshore accounts were by the wealthy.
Absolutely. And you'll remember in the Panama Papers, banks were implicated as facilitators in the Panama Papers leak. So perhaps not a huge surprise that they used tax haven themselves. It should be noted, though, some banks were seen as more aggressive about using offshore accounts to evade taxes than others in the Oxfam report. Also, this comes as European banks generally have been under pressure amid a protracted period of low to negative central bank rates, not to mention big fines levied by governments for illicit activities. Now, the IMF did note that there were three major headwinds the European banking sector is currently dealing with. The first being excess capacity, that is too many banks, a heavy load of non-performing loans, and stricter bank recovery and resolution guidelines, leading to structurally low return on assets than, say, their U.S. counterparts.
Now, speaking of the IMF Managing Director Christine Lagarde this week expressed some optimism about global growth.
She absolutely did. Lagarde said there was a momentum building for better than expected growth worldwide. And here's a snippet of that speech at a think tank in Brussels on Wednesday.
After 6 years of disappointing growth, the world economy is gaining momentum as a cyclical recovery holds out the promise of more jobs, higher incomes, and greater prosperity going forward.
And as you can see there, back in January, the IMF had released revised forecasts, which showed the global economy would pick up to 3.4% this year and then to 3.6% in 2018. You can see the Eurozone's projection, on the other hand, did get a slight trim. The IMF is set to release new projections next Tuesday, also as the fund and the World Bank hold spring meetings in Washington next week. Managing Director Christine Lagarde, though, warned of diffusing this momentum with a quote-unquote sword of protectionism, arguing instead for strengthening the global trade architecture over disrupting supply chains that would ultimately lead to higher costs for the end consumer. In its pre-release of its fiscal monitor, the IMF also advised governments to stop meddling with tax systems and instead simplify them while cracking down on tax dodgers to improve overall productivity. It said doing so could lift annual growth rates by 0.7 percentage points over 20 years for advanced economies and, get this, 1.3 points in emerging economies.
Well, better than expected growth for all of us is very good news to hear, and I'm hoping that this positive trend will actually last.
We'll see next week.
All right. Thank you so much for coming in today.
You bet.
And that wraps it up for today and this week. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll be back next week with more at the same time, same place for your Business Daily. Until then, goodbye.